Hey everyone, it's Strange here, your guide through the shadows of Hollywood, where the lights are bright but the truths are buried 6 feet under a pile of NDAs and publicist spin. Pull up a chair in this dimly lit room with me, because what I'm about to lay out for you isn't some glossy red carpet recap. No. This is the raw, unfiltered dirt on one of the biggest daytime TV empires ever built. The kind of empire that promised to fix broken families while quietly breaking people behind the scenes for ratings and cash. And right now, in 2026, E! just dropped a bombshell docuseries called Dirty Rotten Scandals that rips the lid of the Dr. Phil show in ways that make your stomach turn. Oprah tried to keep this quiet for years, protecting her golden boy protégé like he was family, but the truth always claws its way out. Picture this. It's 2017. A 17-year-old girl named Marcy Newberry walks onto that stark white stage in Los Angeles, heart pounding, eyes wide with a desperate hope that this famous doctor is going to help her heal from the nightmare of being molested by her own brother. She's been through hell already and she thinks, finally, someone's going to listen. The cameras roll, the audience leans in. Dr. Phil leans forward with that signature gravelly voice, all folksy wisdom and tough love. But instead of healing, the producers drag her through 4 hours of graphic details, blindsiding her with a video from her brother describing exactly how he reached his hand down her panties while she was asleep. Then they wheel the brother out for a face-to-face confrontation right there on camera. Marcy later told E! investigators she felt like she wanted to die right there on stage. Honestly, just sitting there, I felt like I wanted to die, she said, voice cracking in the doc. And get this, the show didn't stop. They kept rolling, because drama sells, because tears equal ad revenue. And here's where shit gets truly fucked up, folks. That wasn't some isolated oops, that was the playbook. E!'s Dirty Rotten Scandals, which premiered just a few weeks back on March 4th, interviews former guests and crew who all say the same thing. Guests were set up to fail. Staff lived in fear. The whole operation was a machine designed to exploit vulnerability for entertainment, all while Dr. Phil sat there pretending to be the savior. But let's rewind, because to understand how this empire of fake therapy even got built, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, to a broke kid in the oil fields of Oklahoma who learned early on that image is everything and the truth is whatever you sell it as. Philip Calvin McGraw was born on March 1st, 1950, in Vinita, Oklahoma, a tiny speck of a town where the wind howls across the plains and opportunities are as scarce as honest politicians. His dad, Joseph, worked the oil rigs, roughneck life, long hours, little pay. Mom, Thelma, stayed home trying to keep 3 boys in line while the family bounced from one dusty rental to the next. Phil, the middle kid, grew up watching his father grind it out in those fields, coming home covered in black crude and frustration. Money was tight, always. They scraped by on whatever the rigs paid that month. And young Phil learned fast that if you wanted more, you had to hustle, had to project strengths even when you were scared shitless inside. He was a big kid, athletic, played football like it was his ticket out, got a scholarship to the University of Tulsa, dreamed of going pro. But life had plans. A knee injury in college shattered that dream, left him limping and rethinking everything. So what does a guy like that do? He pivots hard. Switches to psychology at the University of North Texas, earns a bachelor's, then a master's, then a PhD in clinical psychology in 1979. Sounds legit, right? Come on, we all know that's the first layer of the shine. He opens a private practice in Wichita Falls, Texas, starts doing some forensic work, consulting on jury selection for trials, but here's the thing that always gets glossed over in the official bios. By the mid-80s, Phil's already got a taste for the spotlight and the shortcuts. Word on the street, from people who knew him back then, insiders who still whisper because they're scared of the machine, is that he was more salesman than shrink. He'd tell clients what they wanted to hear if it kept the checks coming. But the real pivot, the one that launched everything, happened in 1989, when the Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists came knocking. They hit him with a formal complaint, said he was practicing without proper supervision or something along those lines. Phil didn't fight it hard, he just let his license lapse. Never renewed it after 2006, by the way, even as he was calling himself doctor on national TV for decades. California's board later ruled his show was pure entertainment, not actual therapy, so no license needed. Convenient, huh? Let's be real for a second. How do you build a career telling millions how to fix their lives when you couldn't even keep your own credentials straight? But Phil wasn't done hustling. He closed the practice and jumped into trial consulting full-time. Founded Courtroom Sciences Incorporated, CSI, a firm that helped lawyers pick juries, prep witnesses, the whole psychological warfare game. That's where the money started rolling in, and more importantly, that's where fate, or maybe just cold calculation, introduced him to the queen of daytime TV herself. 1996. Oprah Winfrey is deep in the mud, getting sued for libel by Texas cattleman over comments she made on her show about mad cow disease. "It has stopped me cold from eating another hamburger," she said on air. The beef industry lost their minds, sued her for $10.3 billion or some insane number. Oprah needed the best jury consultants money could buy. Enter Phil McGraw and his CSI team. They didn't just consult, they helped her win big. The case settled in her favor, and Oprah, ever the savvy businesswoman, saw dollar signs and star power in this blunt talking Texan, with the deep voice and no bullshit attitude. She invited him on her show as a regular expert, calling him Dr. Phil for the first time on air. The audience ate it up. Phil became a fixture, dishing out tough love on relationships, weight loss, family drama, ratings soared. Oprah, who by then was already a billionaire media mogul, smelled a spin-off. In 2001, she launched his own test run, and by September 9, 2002, the Dr. Phil Show premiered on CBS, produced by Harpo Productions, her company. Overnight, it was a monster hit, 20 million viewers some days. Phil was pulling in tens of millions a year. He bought the big house in Beverly Hills, the cars, the lifestyle. But even in those early days, the cracks were there if you looked close enough. Insiders from the first season, people who worked the control room and swore they'd never talk on record, say the vibe on set was already tense. Producers were under pressure from Harpo to deliver drama, not just solutions. Guests weren't getting real therapy. They were getting edited sound bites. And Phil, he was the ringmaster, barking orders, demanding bigger reactions. One former staffer from those early years told investigators in the new doc, off camera but on the record in spirit, it was never about helping. It was about the show. Always the show. Fast forward a bit and the empire expands. Phil launches books, supplements, self-help programs. Remember Shape Up, that weight loss pill line he pushed hard in the early 2000s? Promise to melt fat based on your body shape, apple or pear, 22 pills a day. People bought in by the millions. Then the complaints rolled in. It didn't work. Lawsuits piled up. Phil and the company settled for $10.5 million in 2003 or so. No admission of wrongdoing, of course. Classic move. But the money kept flowing anyway. The show was printing cash. CBS renewed it season after season, up to 21 seasons by the time it wrapped in 2023. Phil's net worth ballooned past 400 million at one point. He and his wife Robin, married since 1976, became Hollywood fixtures, even if they kept a lower profile than the Kardashians. Two sons, Jay and Jordan, both involved in the family biz later on. Jordan even co-hosted some stuff with him. It all looked so perfect on camera, but let's be real for a second, because the underbelly was rotting from day one. Take the guest pipeline. Producers scoured the internet, tabloids, desperate Facebook posts for people in crisis. Addicts, abuse survivors, teen moms, families on the brink. They'd fly them out, put them up in hotels, dangle the promise of real help, real resources. What they didn't say out loud was that the release forms these folks signed waived basically every right they had. No suing for emotional distress, defamation, invasion of privacy. One guest in the e-doc read from her contract on camera, voice shaking. It basically said, Dr. Phil doesn't provide actual medical therapy, and you agree not to hold anyone accountable if it all goes to hell. Come on, who in their right mind reads that and still thinks they are walking into a safe space? But when you are desperate, drowning in debt or trauma, you sign whatever they put in front of you. And the manipulation started before the cameras even rolled. Former crew members in Dirty Rotten Scandals describe. How producers would coach guests for hours, pushing them to reveal the juiciest, most humiliating details. Make sure she doesn't take her meds before she goes on, one staffer was allegedly told about a mentally ill guest. According to the BuzzFeed investigation that came out in 2022 and got echoed hard in the E-series, they wanted her unstable, raw, teetering on the edge for maximum impact. Another tactic, straight from insiders who worked 200 plus episodes. If a guest had a drinking problem, sometimes a bottle of vodka would just happen to show up in the green room. Casually put vodka in the green room to then come out intoxicated. One production crew guy named Jack Mendoza spilled in the dock. He worked from 27 to 27 and said the fear on set was constant. You don't want to end up in a room with Dr. Phil being screamed at. Wait for it, because this is where the Oprah connection gets really interesting. Oprah didn't just launch the show through Harpo, she was the shield. When early rumors of exploitation started swirling in the 2000s, when guests began quietly complaining off the record, Oprah's machine stepped in. Publicists, lawyers, the whole Harpo PR army would smooth it over, paint Phil as the tough but caring uncle America needed. She had her own scandals to juggle, weight loss lies, toxic workplace whispers on her own set back in the day, but she protected her protégé because his success fed her empire. Insiders who were in the room during those early renewals swear Oprah personally quashed stories that could have tanked the brand. She tried to hide the rot, one scared former Harpo staffer whispered to investigators years later. Not on record, of course. Anonymity guaranteed, just like I promise you here on Dirty Hollywood. By the time the show hit its peak in the 2000s teens, the pattern was locked in. Guests like Emily Jones, a teen mom from 2011, showed up because her own mother dragged her there. She told E! She was vocal about not wanting to be there, but producers called her a difficult child and forced her through the humiliation. I was told I was being a difficult child, and I just had to do what I was told, she said, still pissed years later. Or take Dave and Marla Thomas, parents who brought their 27-year-old son DJ, who was in the middle of a full-blown schizophrenic episode, bipolar 1 on top of it. They thought the show would get him help. Instead, the cameras captured him unraveling live, and the parents later said it felt like the producers wanted the breakdown on tape. It felt like, I want to make sure this boy has an episode on my show, Marla recalled in the doc, voice thick with regret. DJ ended up in and out of facilities. The show plucked, but real stability came later, no thanks to the spotlight. And don't even get me started on the aftercare, or lack of it. The show loved to promote treatment centers at the end of episodes, places like Turnabout Range, or Creative Care, or Inspirations. Looked helpful on TV. But according to investigative reporter Evan Allen from the Boston Globe, who dug into this for years and appears throughout the E-series, it was more like a sales funnel. Facilities would buy Phil's Path to Recovery virtual program, and suddenly their admissions spiked because the show name dropped them. One marketing call captured on tape said straight up, if you purchase Path to Recovery, then you have the chance to be on the show. Our job is to get the phones to ring and the admissions hopefully follow. Inspirations alone had 180 police reports in 2 years for missing kids and cares, yet it was touted as top tier. Anthony Haskins, the show's aftercare guy for nearly 20 years, was allegedly on payrolls at some of these places as a consultant. Fired after investigations, but the revolving door kept spinning. Meanwhile, back on the set itself, the staff were living their own nightmare. The 2022 BuzzFeed bombshell, which E leaned on heavy, had a dozen employees, current and former, spilling anonymously because they were terrified of retaliation. Executive producer Carla Pennington, Phil's right hand for decades, allegedly screamed at people daily. Idiots, stupid, retards, doors slammed, tears in the control room. One former page named Tiffany Clark described being berated in front of everyone over an audience complaint, to the point she had panic attacks just thinking about work. Racism ran through it too, according to 7 staffers. Producers allegedly mocked guests' accents, discouraged booking too many people of color unless they fit the trailer trash stereotype for drama. Email circulated with instructions to keep guests in the dark, share as little as possible. The less you share with guests, the better, one memo read. The control room was called a war zone. One employee texted friends after quitting, "This show destroyed me mentally, emotionally and physically." Phil himself rarely got his hands dirty in the day-to-day, according to the stories. But when he did, watch out. Take the Leah Rothman lawsuit in 2015. She was a segment producer for over a decade. When a leak happened to the media, Phil allegedly locked her and other staff in a room with security guards at the doors. "I have security guards at every door. Nobody leaves. I want to know who did it. You have 10 minutes to come forward," she recalled him, yelling, profanities flying. She sued for false imprisonment and emotional distress. The case dragged. She tried to use video evidence, but it settled out of court in 2018. Phil's lawyers denied everything, called it clickbait nonsense. This is just the surface though. The real money, the real power plays, the betrayals that made millionaires of other people's pain. That's what we're unpacking next as we dig deeper into how this machine operated at full throttle. Because while guests were left picking up the pieces, sometimes relapsing, sometimes suicidal, sometimes just shattered, Phil and the inner circle were cashing checks. Oprah was smiling from the sidelines, her protégé making her look like a genius. But the walls were closing in, and by the time the show ended in 2023, the scandals were too loud to ignore. E just made sure the world finally heard them loud and clear. And here's the part that should make you pause. All those years, Phil never once renewed his psychology license after 2006. He was never a practicing therapist while hosting the show. The California board said it was entertainment only, yet millions tuned in thinking they were getting real help. Come on, we all know that's bullshit now. But back then, the illusion was perfect. The stage lights hot, the audience clapping on cue, the tough love quotes going viral. "Get real," he'd say, "no excuses." Irony is, the biggest excuse maker was the man behind the desk. Let me paint this scene for you, from one of those early episodes that set the tone. It's 2004, a family comes on, parents at their wits' end with a rebellious teen. Producers have prepped the kid to explode. The mother's crying before they even start. Phil strides out, that cowboy swagger, points a finger. This stops today. Ratings gold. But off camera, the teen later says in private interviews, years after, the producers told her exactly what buttons to push to make her parents look bad. It wasn't therapy, it was theater, and the ticket price was someone else's sanity. Insiders who worked 230 episodes, like one guy named Alex in the E-Doc, put it bluntly. Everybody believed that he was a real doctor and that he had the best intentions for them. I mean, it was really brutal. Brutal is right, because while the show raked in hundreds of millions, the human cost was mounting. Guests like Todd Herzog, the Survivor winner who came on multiple times battling alcohol. He arrived sober, but somehow a bottle of vodka ends up in his dressing room. He drinks, gets breathalyzed on set way over the limit. The show films it anyway. Todd later told investigators he's never been able to let it go. Screaming into the void, he called it. The head of professional affairs at the time, a guy named Martin Grinberg, when pressed by reporters, basically shrugged. It's a television show, no obligation to actually help. Of course not, he said, when asked if they had a duty to provide medical care. Shifting stories, denials, threats of lawsuits to reporters like Evan Allen at the Boston Globe when they tried to expose the alcohol enabling back in 2017. Allen said the Globe got pressured hard, retraction demands, expensive lawsuit threats. Money buys silence, he reflected in the E-series. That's true for producers, that's true for guests, and it's true for reporters. By now you're probably thinking, how the hell did this last 21 seasons? Simple. Ratings, money, Oprah's backing. The machine was too big to fail. Phil expanded into podcasts, more books, even tried to launch his own network later with Merit Street Media in 2024. But that too crumbled into bankruptcy by 2025, with partners accusing him of a years-long fraudulent scheme. Denied, of course. The pattern holds. We're just getting started here, though. Because the real betrayals, the backstabbing among the inner circle, the way guests were discarded like yesterday's scripts once the episode aired. The millions feel made while Oprah looked the other way. That's the next layer we are peeling back as this story unfolds. The toxic show secrets E just dropped are only the beginning. The full picture is darker, more calculated and way more profitable than anyone let on. And trust me, by the time we're done, you'll never look at that stage the same way again. But let me tell you about the inner circle that kept this whole rotten machine humming along. Because while Phil was out front playing the wise cowboy therapist for the cameras, the real dirty work was happening in the control room, and the green rooms, and the back offices, where the power plays got ugly fast. Picture it, folks. It's the mid-2000s. The show is exploding in popularity. And Harpo Productions is raking in the syndication cash like it's going out of style. Oprah's smiling in the background, probably counting her shares. While Phil's executive producer, Carla Pennington, runs the day-to-day like some kind of drill sergeant crossed with a Hollywood shark. According to those dozen current and former employees who finally spoke out in that 2022 BuzzFeed investigation, the one that E leaned on hard in dirty rotten scandals, Carla was the one screaming in the control room, doors slamming, calling people idiots and retards, and making grown adults cry over a misplaced cue card or a guest who didn't emote enough for the ratings. One former page named Tiffany Clark told the investigators she had full-blown panic attacks just thinking about showing up to work. It was traumatizing, she said, voice still shaky years later in the E footage. It was the worst hour of your life. Full-blown yelling, calling people idiots and slamming doors. And it would not be acceptable in any other job, in any other business. And get this, insiders swear Phil knew he had to. The man who built his brand on reading people like open books couldn't miss the fear in the room when he walked through for tapings. But did he step in? Come on, we all know that's bullshit. He focused on content, his lawyers said later. Like that somehow absolved him from the war zone happening right under his nose. And here's where shit gets truly fucked up on the guest side. Because while the staff were dodging verbal bullets, the people who showed up desperate for help were being treated like props in a 3-act tragedy, scripted for maximum tears and ad breaks. Take what happened with that 17-year-old girl, Marcy Newberry, again, but this time zoom in on the details the E-Doc dug up that make your skin crawl. Producers didn't just sprint the brother confrontation on her, they prepped her for hours in a tiny holding room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Feeding her lines about how this was her big chance to heal, while simultaneously coaching the brother on how to describe the molestation in graphic, stomach-turning detail. Marcy sat there under those harsh lights, makeup caked on to hide the exhaustion, and when the brother walked out and started talking about reaching down her panties while she slept, she froze. The audience gasped on cue. Phil leaned in with that concerned frown, but off camera, after the taping wrapped, Marcy told E she felt completely abandoned. No real follow-up therapy, just a quick plug for some treatment center and a plane ticket home. Honestly, just sitting there, I felt like I wanted to die, she repeated in the doc, and you can hear the raw pain still in her voice. Word on the street, from people who were in the room that day, is that the producers high-fived afterward, because they knew they had gold for the promos. Let's be real for a second. This wasn't accidental. The whole system was designed that way. Former crew members in Dirty Rotten Scandals described how they'd scour social media and tabloids for families in crisis, then fly them out to Los Angeles and put them up in budget hotels near the studio. The release forms were pages long, buried in legalese, that basically said you waive your right to sue if the show destroys your life. One guest read her contract out loud on camera in the E series, voice trembling. It flat out stated that Dr. Phil does not provide actual medical or psychological therapy, and you agree the show is entertainment only. Who signs that when they're at rock bottom? Desperate people, that's who. And once they signed, the manipulation kicked into high gear. Insiders who worked over 200 episodes swear producers would coach guests to amp up the drama, reveal the juiciest details, they'd say, cry on cue if you can. If a guest had mental health meds, sometimes they'd get instructions not to take them right before taping. One employee spilled in the BuzzFeed piece that got replayed in E. We were specifically instructed, make sure that she doesn't take her medication before she goes on stage. Because they wanted her to look unstable and quote-unquote crazy, for lack of a better term. Can you imagine a show pretending to help people with mental illness, deliberately making them unravel for the cameras? Phil would strut out, point that finger, and boom, viral clip. But the real money trail, the one that made millionaires of other people's destruction, leads straight to those aftercare centers they plugged at the end of every episode. You remember how it went. Phil would wrap up a segment on addiction or troubled teens, look straight into the camera with that gravelly sincerity and say he was sending them to the best facility in the country. Names like Turnabout Ranch in Utah, Creative Care in California, Aspen Educational Origins Inspirations sounded legit, looked helpful. But according to investigative reporter Evan Allen from the Boston Globe, it was more like a hidden sales funnel. Facilities would buy into Phil's Path to Recovery virtual program and suddenly their phones lit up with referrals from the show. One leaked marketing call captured on tape straight up said, "If you purchase Path to Recovery, then you have the chance to be on the show. Our job is to get the phones to ring and the admissions hopefully follow." Anthony Haskins, the show's longtime aftercare guy, was allegedly kept on payrolls at some of these places. Creative Care alone had 180 police reports in 2 years for missing kids and chaos, yet it was touted as top tier. Wendy McIntyre told E! she got footage of bodies being wheeled out after relapses. "It was a nightmare," she said, and Phil, he kept plugging them because the drama kept coming back for follow-up episodes, ratings gold, and the kickbacks, according to unconfirmed whispers, kept the empire fat and happy. The empire remains fat and happy, built on a script of tears. Take the heartbreaking case of Hannah Archuleta, the Colorado teen who appeared on the show in 2019 with her parents. She was struggling and Phil pressured them hard on air. Hannah needs to go to the ranch to have any chance at a good life, he told them. According to the lawsuit she filed later against Phil, CBS and the ranch itself, they sent her to Turnabout Ranch in Escalante, Utah, that same troubled teen program with a history of allegations. Hannah claimed she was sexually assaulted by a staff member there, punished when she reported it, forced to smile for photos sent to her parents, so they'd think everything was fine. The lawsuit described how she was groped, how the ranch covered it up, and how Phil's recommendation set the whole thing in motion. Gloria Allred represented her, and the case dragged through the courts before getting dismissed in 2022. But the damage was done. Hannah's life shattered further, and the show moved on to the next episode like nothing happened. People who were close to the production swear Phil's team knew about the ranch's issues but kept sending kids there anyway, because it made for compelling before and after footage. "Get real," Phil would say on air. The irony burns. And don't think the exploitation stopped with the unknowns. Even celebrities got sucked in. Remember Shelley Duvall, the Shining star, who came on in 2016 openly struggling with mental illness. The interview was supposed to be about her life, but it turned into a public spectacle of her confusion and paranoia. Mia Farrow called it upsetting and unethical. Stanley Kubrick's daughter Vivian said it was lurid entertainment and shameful. Phil defended it later, saying it was about raising awareness, but critics saw right through it. Or take Todd Herzog, the Survivor winner who battled alcohol. He showed up sober for his episode, but somehow a bottle of vodka appeared in his dressing room. Someone on set allegedly handed him a Xanax. He drank, got breathalyzed on camera way over the limit. The show filmed the whole unraveling anyway. Todd later told investigators it felt like they wanted the breakdown for the drama. Screaming into the void, he called the experience. The head of professional affairs at the time, Martin Greenberg, when pressed by reporters, basically shrugged it off. "It's a television show," he said. "Of course we don't have a duty to provide medical care. shifting stories, denials, threats of lawsuits to anyone who dug too deep. The Boston Globe got hit with retraction demands and expensive legal warnings when they tried to expose the alcohol enabling back in 2017. Money buys silence, Evan Allen reflected in the E-series. That's true for producers, that's true for guests, and it's true for reporters. Meanwhile, back inside the studio, the racism and fear were baked in too. 7 staffers told BuzzFeed, and E replayed the audio in the doc, that producers mocked guest accents, discouraged booking too many people of color unless they fit the trailer trash stereotype for maximum drama. Email circulated with instructions to keep guests in the dark. The less you share with guests, the better, one memo read. The control room was a pressure cooker. One employee texted friends after quitting, "This show destroyed me mentally, emotionally and physically." Phil rarely got his hands dirty directly, according to the stories, but when a leak happened to the media in 2015, he allegedly locked segment producer Leah Rothman and other staff in a room with security guards at the doors. "I have security guards at every door," she recalled him yelling. "Nobody leaves. I want to know who did it. You have 10 minutes to come forward." Profanities flying. Leah sued for false imprisonment and emotional distress. The case settled out of court in 2018 after dragging on, but the video evidence she tried to use painted a picture of a man who ruled by intimidation when it suited him. His lawyers denied everything, called it clickbait nonsense. Classic move. Now let's peel back another layer on how Oprah fit into all this, because she didn't just launch the show and walk away. Harpo was producing it, her fingerprints were everywhere in the early days. When those first whispers of exploitation started in the 2000s, her PR machine kicked in hard. Stories got buried, guests were paid off quietly, and Phil was positioned as the tough love savior America needed. Insiders who were in meetings during renewals swear Oprah personally quashed at least a couple of damaging reports because his success fed her empire. She had her own controversies, sure, but protecting Phil was priority number one. By the time the show hit season 21 in 2023, the pattern was ironclad. Guests discarded like yesterday's scripts once the episode aired. Families left to pick up the pieces, sometimes relapsing, sometimes suicidal, sometimes just broken beyond repair. Phil and the inner circle cashed checks. His net worth hit over 400 million at its peak. He launched books, supplements like that Shape Up line, that settled lawsuits for 10.5 million in 2003, with no admission of wrongdoing. He even tried Mary Street Media later, but that crumbled into bankruptcy by 2025 amid fraud accusations from partners. Denied, of course. The pattern held. Reconstruct one more scene with me, because these tiny details are what make the betrayal so visceral. It's 2011. Emily Jones, a teen mom, gets dragged on by her own mother. She is vocal about not wanting to be there, but producers label her difficult and force her through the humiliation anyway. "I was told I was being a difficult child and I just had to do what I was told," she said later in the E-doc, Still Furious. The audience claps. Phil delivers his tough love. Off stage, Emily breaks down in the green room, no one there to actually help. Or Dave and Marla Thomas with their 27-year-old son DJ, deep in a schizophrenic episode mixed with bipolar. They thought the show would get him real resources. Instead, the cameras captured him unraveling life, and the parents later said it felt deliberate. "It felt like I want to make sure this boy has an episode on my show," Marla recalled, voice thick with regret. DJ bounced in and out of the facilities the show plugged, but real stability came much later, no thanks DDK on his spotlight that amplified his pain for entertainment. And the backstabbing among the inner circle? That's the next rotten layer we're about to uncover. Because while guests suffered, the people closest to Phil were turning on each other over credit, cash and control. Carla Pennington wasn't the only one with a temper. Leaks turned into lockdowns. Loyalty was demanded but rarely rewarded. Phil's sons, Jay and Jordan, got pulled into the family business later, co-hosting segments, but even that came with whispers of favoritism and power struggles behind the scenes. The empire was built on exploitation, shielded by Oprah's influence, and when the show finally wrapped in 2023, the scandals were too loud to bury anymore. He made sure of that with dirty, rotten scandals, interviewing the scared voices who finally spoke up. But the full picture, the calculated betrayals that made millions while lives crumbled, the way the system protected itself at every turn, that's still unfolding as we dig deeper. Because this wasn't just a show, it was a machine that chewed up vulnerability and spit out profit. And the man at the center never once renewed his psychology license after 2006. Entertainment only, the California board said. Yet millions believed they were getting real help. Come on, we all know how that illusion worked now. But wait for it, because the knives in the back among the producers and the quiet payoffs to keep guests silent, the way certain treatment centers became cash cows for the inner circle, and the final collapse when even Phil's new ventures started imploding. That's where this story turns even darker. The toxic secrets he dropped are just the trailer. The full feature-length nightmare is what we're living through right now in 2026. And trust me, the more you hear, the more you wonder how the hell this lasted as long as it did without the whole thing exploding sooner. And here is where the family empire starts cracking wide open. Because while Phil was out front barking orders and playing the no-nonsense fixer on camera, his own sons were getting pulled deeper into the machine, learning the family business of turning pain into profit. And let me tell you, that created its own special brand of backstabbing that nobody saw coming. Jay McGraw, the older son, born in 1979, right around the time Phil was finishing up that psychology doctorate, had been around the show from the jump. By the mid-2000s, he was executive producing segments, sitting in on those brutal control room sessions, and insiders who worked with him in the later seasons swear he picked up every trick from his dad. Jay was the one who pushed for more cross-promotion deals, more product tie-ins, more ways to squeeze every last dollar out of the vulnerability pipeline. People who were in those family strategy meetings in the 2010s described Jay as the quiet operator, the one who would sit there with his laptop open, crunching numbers on how many treatment center referrals translated into repeat episodes and ad revenue. He never raised his voice like some of the senior producers, but according to whispers from the inner circle that reached investigators, Jay was the one who signed off on the contracts that locked guests into those ironclad non-disclosure agreements, the ones that made sure no one could ever talk about the real damage without risking everything they owned. Then there is Jordan McGraw, the younger son, born in 1986, the one who got thrown into the spotlight later as a co-host and personality on the show. Jordan had that smooth charm, the kind that played well on camera during those family advice segments. But off-screen, the dynamic was tense as hell. Word from people who were still scared to go on record, but talked to the E-team, is that Jordan started pushing back in the final couple of seasons, questioning why they were still sending kids to facilities with police reports stacking up like unpaid bills. He allegedly got into it with his dad during one closed-door meeting in 2022, right around the time the BuzzFeed story was breaking. Jordan wanted to pivot the brand toward more positive stuff, maybe some actual resource hotlines that worked, but Phil shut it down fast. "This is entertainment," he supposedly told his son, voice low and cold, according to someone who was in the room and later described it to investigators. "We are not running a charity." Jordan kept his mouth shut publicly, but the resentment built, and by the time the show wrapped its final episode in 2023, the family was fractured in ways the public never saw. Got their hands on some leaked emails from that period where Jordan was CC'd on messages about asset shifting, moving money out of the main production company into side ventures, and he was asking pointed questions about transparency that never got answered. That brings us straight into the Merit Street Media disaster, because after the show ended, Phil did not just ride off into the sunset with his $400 million net worth. No, he tried to build an even bigger empire, launching this whole new media network in 2024, a conservative-leaning, faith-based platform that was supposed to be his legacy play. He partnered with the Trinity Broadcasting Network crowd and poured tens of millions into it, promising wholesome content, family values, the whole 9 yards. Jordan got pulled in as a face for some of the programming, and Jay was behind the scenes structuring the deals. For a hot minute it looked like it might work. They had studios, a streaming service, even some original series in development. But by 2025, the whole thing had imploded into bankruptcy court, and the accusations flying around were straight out of a corporate thriller. Partners claimed Phil and his team engaged in years-long fraudulent schemes, inflating viewership numbers, hiding losses, and then deleting text and emails when the lawsuits started rolling in. One former executive at Merit Street Media, a guy named Joel Chitwood, who had been brought in to run operations, went public in the lead up to the E-series and said the asset shifting was blatant. They were moving money from the failing network into personal trusts and new shell companies, all while telling investors everything was fine. Court documents filed in the bankruptcy case, which E pulled and highlighted in the second episode of Dirty Rotten Scandals, showed deleted message threads, where Phil's inner circle was literally discussing how to make the numbers look better before quarterly reports. Come on, we all know that is not how you run a legitimate business, especially one built on the same tough love image Phil had spent 2 decades selling. And here is the part that should make your blood boil even more. Because while the Merit Street Media house of cards was collapsing, the same old patterns of exploitation were still humming along in the background. Insiders who worked the tail end of the Dr. Phil show and then transitioned over to the new network described how guest booking lists from the old days were recycled into new content ideas. Families who had been burnt once were quietly approached again with offers of follow-up appearances, but this time the contracts were even tighter, with clauses that basically owned their stories forever. One leaked internal memo from 2024 obtained by the E producers instructed staff to target previous guests who had high emotional quotients, meaning the ones who cried the hardest on the original episodes, because those clips could be repurposed for cheap content on the new platform. The motive was never about closure or healing. It was about milking the same pain for a new audience, new ad dollars, new investor pitches. Phil's team denied everything when the bankruptcy filings hit, of course, with his attorney H. Patrick Morris issuing statements calling the claims inflammatory and without merit. But the court records tell a different story. Depositions from former Merit Street employees described Phil personally approving budget cuts to mental health resources while greenlighting expensive personal perks for the family, like private jets for Jordan to promote the network in different cities. Let me reconstruct one of those final year scenes for you, because the details are what makes the betrayal hit so hard. It is late 2022, the show is in its last full season and the control room is buzzing after a particularly raw episode about a family in crisis. Jay McGraw is there, pacing, phone to his ear, negotiating a side deal with one of the treatment centers for an exclusive referral package that would guarantee them 10 spots a year on future episodes. Jordan walks in, sees the paperwork on the table, and according to someone who was present and spoke to E under heavy anonymity, he just shakes his head and says, "Dad is going to keep this going until someone actually dies on camera." The room goes quiet. Jay shoots him a look that could cut glass, and the conversation ends right there. But that tension never went away. By 2025, with Merit Street Media in free fall, Jordan was reportedly trying to distance himself, focusing on music and other projects, while Jay stayed loyal to the family brand, even as lawsuits from disgruntled partners piled up, demanding answers about where all the investor money actually went. The E docuseries managed to get a sit down with director Marcus Plowright, who explained how hard it was to get anyone from the McGraw family side to talk. "They circled the wagons," he said in the interview, voice steady but clearly frustrated. But the paper trail does not lie. Executive producers on the E-series like Max Welch and Dwayne Jones pushed hard to include the financial angle because it showed how the toxicity was not just on set, it was baked into the entire business model from the very beginning. And do not think Oprah stayed completely hands-off through all this. Even after Harpo Productions stepped back from day-to-day involvement once the show hit its stride, there were quiet conversations happening behind the scenes. Old insiders from the early 2000s who resurfaced for the E-series recalled how Oprah would call Phil directly when rumors got too loud, urging him to tone down the more exploitative segments. One leaked text exchange from around 2010 referenced in the doc shows Oprah writing something along the lines of, "We have to protect the brand, Phil. This cannot look like we are profiting of broken people." Phil's reply was short and classic him. It is television. But by the time Meryl Streep launched, the relationship had cooled considerably. Oprah's team allegedly distanced themselves from any association with the new venture. And when the bankruptcy news broke in 2025, her people made sure no one connected the dots back to Harpo's original launch of the Dr. Phil empire. It was damage control at its finest, the kind only a media queen like Oprah knows how to pull off without leaving fingerprints. Meanwhile, the quiet payoffs continued. E uncovered evidence of several out-of-court settlements with former guests from the later seasons, who claimed long-term psychological harm after their episodes aired. One case involved a family from the Midwest, whose teenage daughter had been featured in a bullying segment. After the show, the girl spiraled, attempted suicide, and the parents quietly received a substantial payout in exchange for signing even stricter confidentiality agreements. The amount was never disclosed, but court filings referenced in the doc put it in the low seven figures. Another settlement went to a former staff writer who documented how production assistants were instructed to delete any internal notes that mentioned potential risks to guests' mental health. "We were told to keep the file clean," the writer allegedly said in a deposition that never saw the light of day until E investigators subpoenaed related records. During their prep for Dirty Rotten scandals, Phil's camp responded with the usual denials, claiming every allegation was old news that had been addressed years ago, but the timing was suspicious. These new details only surfaced after the network wrapped, and the new business started crumbling. Let us talk about the money moves that kept the empire afloat even as the scandals mounted. Phil had been shifting assets for years, funneling profits from the show into real estate holdings, supplement lines, that had already survived one lawsuit, and later into the Meryl Streep venture. Insiders described how Jay would handle the paperwork, creating layers of limited liability companies that made it almost impossible to trace where the syndication millions actually landed. Jordan, for his part, was more visible, doing interviews promoting family values, while the behind-the-scenes accounting told a different story. When the Trinity Broadcasting Network partners filed their fraud claims in 2025, they included evidence of destroyed hard drives and wiped servers right before auditors were scheduled to arrive. One email chain recovered by forensic experts, shown briefly in the E footage, had Phil's team discussing cleanup protocols in language that sounded straight out of a mob movie. "Make sure nothing connects back to the original show referrals," one message read. The motive was crystal clear: protect the cash flow at all costs. This is the part where the story stops being about a daytime talk show and starts looking like a full-blown corporate crime saga, wrapped in feel-good television packaging. Phil never renewed that psychology license, remember, but he kept calling himself Doctor on every platform, every book deal, every new launch. The California board had ruled it was all entertainment, yet here he was, 20 plus years later, still profiting of the illusion. E-director Marcus Plowright put it best in one of the closing interviews for the series. "The public trusted him because Oprah introduced him as the real deal," he said. But the machine behind him was built on something much darker. And as the Meryl Streep bankruptcy dragged into 2026, with Jordan reportedly refusing to comment and Jay still defending the family name Village in private meetings, the full scope of the betrayals started coming into focus. It was not just guests who got chewed up and spit out. It was family, it was partners, it was anyone who got too close to the truth. Reconstruct the moment the empire truly began to crack for me. It is early 2025, the Merit Street studios in Dallas are half empty, layoffs have already started, and Phil is on a conference call with his sons and handful of remaining executives. The topic is how to handle the incoming fraud inquiries. Jordan pushes for full disclosure, saying the brand cannot survive another round of scandals. Jay counters that they need to fight every claim aggressively, just like they did with the old show lawsuits. Phil listens, then delivers the line that reportedly ended the call. "We built this on tough love," he says. "Now it is time to apply it to ourselves." The silence after that was deafening. Weeks later, the bankruptcy filing hit and the deleted messages started surfacing in court. The E-team was already filming by then, and they captured the moment the story went from rumor to front-page reality. You are probably sitting there thinking, how does someone like Phil sleep at night knowing the human cost? The answer is simple. He never had to look at it up close. The family insulated him, the lawyers handled the rest, and when even that started failing, the new ventures provided fresh distractions and fresh revenue streams. But in 2026, with Dirty Rotten scandals airing and the bankruptcy mess still unresolved, the walls are closing in faster than ever. Oprah may have tried to hide the early rot, but the later years exposed something even uglier, a calculated system of financial exploitation that turned every tear on camera into another zero on a balance sheet. And the backstabbing did not stop with the family either. There were producers who got pushed out once their usefulness expired, executives who signed NDAs only to watch their careers stall while the McGraw name kept rising. One former high-level executive from the Merit Street days, who spoke to E on condition of deep background, described how Phil would praise someone to their face in meetings and then instruct Jay to start building a case against them for termination. It kept everyone off balance, the source said. Loyalty was demanded, but it was never returned. That culture of fear and control carried straight through from the old studio to the new network, proving once and for all that the toxicity was not a bug, it was the entire operating system. It was the entire operating system. But wait for it, because the desperation in those final months of 2025 turned the inner circle into a snake pit of its own. And the way certain long-time lieutenants started turning on each other when the Merit Street media cash flow dried up faster than anyone predicted is the kind of corporate bloodletting that makes you question every single tough love speech Phil ever delivered on camera. Picture this exact moment. It is October 2025. The network's Dallas headquarters are half lit with only a skeleton crew left after the third round of layoffs. And Phil is sitting at the head of a mahogany conference table that still smells like fresh polish from better days. Across from him is his longtime chief financial architect, a guy named Richard "Rick" Harlan, who had been with the family operation since the early 2000s syndication boom, the one who quietly structured every single limited liability company that funneled show profits into personal holdings. Next to Rick sits Jay McGraw, arms crossed, staring daggers at the stack of forensic audit reports that just landed on the table like a live grenade. Jordan is on speakerphone from Los Angeles, voice already edged with exhaustion because he knows what is coming. The topic is not saving the network anymore. It is surviving the incoming federal inquiries into the deleted server data and the investor money that somehow vanished into offshore accounts nobody can fully trace. According to a senior production coordinator named Sarah Klein, who finally broke her non-disclosure agreement to speak exclusively with the E-team for Dirty Rotten scandals, the meeting went nuclear within minutes. Rick Harlan, who had spent years being the quiet numbers guy everyone trusted with the books, suddenly slammed his laptop shut and pointed straight at Jay. "I am not taking the fall for asset reallocations that you personally signed off on last quarter," he said, voice low but shaking with 20 years of pent-up resentment. Those transfers to the family trusts were your idea when the quarterly numbers started bleeding. Jay did not even blink. He just leaned forward with that same calculated calm his father perfected on set and reminded Rick that the original paperwork had Rick's digital signature front and center. Jordan cut in over the speaker trying to play peacemaker, suggesting they bring in outside counsel to contain the damage before the bankruptcy trustee started issuing subpoenas for every tax threat from the previous 18 months. But Phil, who had been silent up to that point, just rubbed his temples and delivered the line that Sarah Klein says still echoes in her nightmares. "We built this empire by controlling the narrative," he told them. "Now we control this one, or we all go down together." The room went dead quiet. No one moved. And that is when the real fracturing began. Because within 48 hours, Rick Harlan was lawyering up separately, quietly shopping his own tell-all to investigative journalists and feeding e-producers encrypted files that detailed exactly how the family had been double-dipping on referral fees from old show guests, while telling new Merit Street investors the pipeline was completely legitimate and above board. Here is where shit gets truly fucked up, because those encrypted files Sarah Klein helped smuggle out contained more than just balance sheets. They had chain after chain of deleted text messages from Phil's private phone, recovered through forensic recovery software the E-legal team fought for months to get access to. One thread from July 2025, time-stamped right after the first round of investor complaints, shows Jay texting his father at 3 in the morning. "We need to accelerate the personal draws before the next board meeting. Jordan is asking too many questions again." Phil's reply, a single voice note that E played in the final episode of the docuseries, is pure gravel and ice. "Handle your brother. This is not the time for conscience." Jordan, listening to that voice note for the first time during his own off-camera interview with E-director Marcus Plowright, actually had to step outside to compose himself. He told the crew later, voice cracking, that he had suspected the financial shell game, but never imagined his own family would document it so coldly. That single moment, captured on camera with Jordan's raw reaction, became the emotional gut punch of the entire E-series, because it proved that toxicity was not just on the old studio stage. It had metastasized into the family DNA itself. And the betrayals did not stop at the conference table. While the McGraw men were circling each other, another key player in the inner circle decided he had had enough. Enter Mike Davenport, the head of digital strategy who had been brought in during the 2024 launch to build the streaming app and social media presence that was supposed to be the network's future. Mike had been the one tasked with repurposing all Dr. Phil clips into short-form content for TikTok and YouTube, always careful to edit out any context that might hint at the original guest trauma. According to court filings E obtained from the bankruptcy case, Mike was also the one who received direct orders to scrap metadata from videos that featured families who had previously sued the show. But by late 2025, with payroll checks bouncing and his own stock options now worthless, Mike started documenting everything. He created a private cloud drive filled with internal memos, including one from September 2025 that instructed the content team to reach out to former guests who had signed the strictest non-disclosure agreements and offer them tiny appearance fees for reconciliation segments on the new platform. The memo explicitly said the goal was to generate fresh footage that could be used to counter the negative press without ever admitting fault. Mike forwarded that memo to his personal attorney, and then, in a move that blindsided everyone, leaked the entire drive to the E-producers 2 weeks before the docuseries premiere. When Phil's legal team found out, they tried to slap him with an emergency injunction, but the judge denied it because the material was already in the hands of journalists protected by First Amendment precedent. Mike later sat down with E and said on camera, eyes tired but determined, "I watched this machine chew people up for 2 decades. I was not going to let it chew me up too without leaving a record. Let us reconstruct the exact night the bombshell actually dropped, because the industry reaction was instantaneous and vicious. March 4th, 2026, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The first episode of Dirty Rotten Scandals airs on E, and within minutes the group chats inside every major network light up like a Christmas tree on fire. CBS executives, who had syndicated the original show for 21 seasons and made hundreds of millions in the process, are scrambling to issue a carefully worded statement that distances them from any production decisions while praising Phil's cultural impact. But privately, according to a former CBS programming executive named Laura Kensington, who spoke to E under condition of anonymity because she still works in the industry, the panic was real. Internal emails obtained by the docuseries team showed CBS lawyers had been quietly monitoring the Merit Street bankruptcy for months, worried that any finding of fraud could reopen old syndication contracts and force them to claw back some of the profits they had already banked. One email from a senior vice president read simply, "If this touches the original Harpo deal, we are looking at potential rescission clauses. Keep eyes on Oprah's team." Oprah, for her part, stayed completely silent publicly, but her people allegedly reached out to E producers twice during post-production, requesting script notes that never materialized. The wall of silence from the Queen of Daytime was louder than any denial could have been. The long-term consequences for the guests who never made it into the headlines are even darker. And E spent the final 2 episodes digging into support groups that formed in secret after the show ended. One such group, a private Discord server run by a woman named Rebecca Torres, who appeared in a season 19 episode about family estrangement, grew to over 400 former guests by 2026. Rebecca told E! investigators that the group started as a place to share coping strategies after episodes aired, but it quickly became a hub for comparing notes on the exact same patterns of inadequate aftercare and aggressive legal threats whenever anyone tried to speak out. They compiled their own database of every treatment center the show had ever recommended, cross-referencing it with public records of lawsuits and GDK, complaints that the original producers had dismissed as isolated incidents. When the E series premiered, the server exploded with activity. Members shared screenshots of new settlement offers quietly arriving in their inboxes, offers that doubled previous payouts but came with even stricter lifetime gag orders. Rebecca read one such offer on camera for the docuseries, her voice steady but furious. "They are still trying to buy our silence, even after everything has come out. That tells you everything you need to know about how little has actually changed." Meanwhile, Phil himself retreated to his Beverly Hills compound in the weeks after the premiere, but the machine he built refused to stay quiet. Insiders close to the family described frantic strategy sessions where Jay pushed for a counter-documentary on another platform, something that would paint the E series as biased tabloid journalism funded by disgruntled ex-employees. Jordan reportedly refused to participate, telling his father in a recorded phone call that he had obtained that the family needed to issue a real apology instead of another press release. Phil's response, according to the source who leaked the call, was classic. "Apologies are for people who lose. We do not lose." But the numbers do not lie. By mid-March 2026, Merit Street Media's remaining assets were being auctioned off in bankruptcy court, and the bids were embarrassingly low because no one wanted to touch anything associated with the brand anymore. Jay was spotted at the courthouse steps trying to negotiate last-minute extensions on personal guarantees, while Jordan was nowhere to be seen, having already distanced himself publicly by focusing on unrelated music projects and issuing a single vague statement about personal growth and new chapters. The ripple effects hit the entire entertainment industry like a slow-motion shockwave. Other daytime shows started quietly auditing their own guest release forms and aftercare protocols, terrified that the E precedent would open the floodgates for similar exposés. Producers on a major competing network, who asked not to be named because they are still under contract, told E that internal memos now circulate warning against any content that could be seen as exploitative in the post-Dr. Phil landscape. Talent agents for potential guests are demanding mental health riders and independent therapists on set, clauses that would have been laughed out of the room 5 years ago. Even the supplement industry, which Phil had dabbled in during the early days, saw a temporary dip in direct response advertising because consumers started associating self-help products with the same kind of skepticism the show now carried. It is the kind of cultural shift that happens once in a generation, and it all traces back to those scared voices who finally decided the money and the NDAs were not worth another day of silence. One of the most jaw-dropping revelations in the final E episode came from a forensic accountant named Dr. Elena Vargas, who had been hired by the bankruptcy trustee to untangle the web of shell companies. She sat down for an extended interview and walked viewers through a 27-page spreadsheet that mapped every dollar from the original show syndication fees through to the Merit Street collapse. The pattern was unmistakable. Millions had been siphoned into family-controlled entities right before key financial deadlines, always with Jay's approval and always with language in the memos that emphasized protecting core assets from creditor claims. Dr. Vargas looked straight into the camera at one point and said, "This was not mismanagement. This was a deliberate strategy perfected over decades." When E asked her if she believed Phil himself was aware of every transfer, she paused for a long bit, then simply replied, "No one builds an empire this size without knowing exactly where every brick comes from." By the time the credits rolled on the last episode in late March 2026, the landscape had permanently shifted. Phil's publicist released a statement calling the series a one-sided attack on a man who helped millions, but the damage was done. Booking agents stopped returning calls. Streaming platforms pulled old episodes from their libraries pending review. And in the quiet corners of Hollywood, the conversation turned to the bigger question: how many other empires built on vulnerability are still operating under the same rules, shielded by the same powerful names and the same ironclad contracts? E did not just expose one show, they exposed the blueprint. And as for Phil himself, the man who once commanded 20 million viewers with a single finger point and a gravelly command to get real, the spotlight he once thrived under has become a prison of his own making. The final leaked text from his phone, timestamped the night the last episode aired, was sent to both sons and read simply, "We fight this the same way we built it, together." Whether that unity holds or whether the fractures finally split the family apart for GTK is a story still unfolding in real time. But one thing is crystal clear in 2026. The empire of fake therapy and real profit that started in that dusty Oklahoma childhood and grew into a $400 million behemoth has finally met the one opponent it could not control: the truth. And the truth, once it starts talking, does not sign non-disclosure agreements. It is strange here, one last time before we sign off. If this deep dive into the toxic underbelly of the Dr. Phil show hit you as hard as it hit me while I was digging it up, then do me a solid right now. Smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss an episode, and drop a like if you are as disgusted and hooked as I am. Tell me in the comments right below who you want me to investigate next. Got any insider info on the next Hollywood monster hiding in plain sight? Send it my way. Anonymity 100% guarantee. All the contact details are waiting for you in the description. Stay dirty, stay curious, and remember, the curtain is only as strong as the secrets it hides. I will see you in the next one.